Welcome students and interested viewers in our first virtual hand quilting class at the Tobacco Farm Life Museum in Kinley, North Carolina, where Melody Worthington is the executive director. My name is Molly Renfro. Have cedar chest quilting. You can reach me at molly.renfro@gmail.com. If you have questions after the class, we're ready for the fun part of making our yo-yos. You want to take your yo-yo maker out. It has two parts, an outer ring and an inner ring. And what we needed that permanent marker for is we want to highlight one of the lines on the inner ring so that we can mark our starting point, when we start our yo-yos. So that's what we're going to use the permanent marker for. And if you don't want to use marker, you can always use a thin colored piece of tape as long as you can find that starting point. And when you look at the outer ring, the bigger one, there are little notches on the side, and we're going to be lining up that mark with that notch to make our starting point. And a little trick I learned with making the yo-yos, we're using a square instead of a circle. And if you look at some of the older patterns, they always have circle fabric. We're using a square because these squares are going to help fill in our yo-yo to make it more of a three-dimensional. So I like to lay the fabric face down, center my inner circle so that I have fabric on all the sides. And then I take a straight pin straight through the center and carefully pick it up so that the needle goes through the fabric and the inner circle. And I have my fabric edge all the way around. It keeps it from shifting. And I turn my starting point to a shorter side so that I can see it. So when I line it up with my outer ring, it's easier to line up. And once my mark and my notch are lined up, I snap that in place and go around and make sure you hear that little click, a little snap. And then I pull up the shorter edges just to make sure I have fabric that's going to overlap. And once it's snapped in place, you don't need that straight pin anymore. With the yo-yos, because we're doing a pillow and it's going to be used either on the couch or on the bed, we want to make sure our yo-yos don't come apart. So we want the thread to be doubled. I like to do it arm's length. It's up to you how much thread you like to work with. Remember to tie your end. And with this, because we've got to tie our yo-yos, you can leave that tail up there because it'll come in handy to grip it. For me, it's easier to have the smaller ring facing me, and I can just take my thumb and fold that fabric over so that when I make my stitch, I'm stitching through both sides of the fabric. And I come up and make sure when you come up, you go down on the same side. As you see the loops, you want to make sure you're in the center of those loops. So the side you come out, that's the side you go up. And this works fairly quickly. I think it takes me about 5 minutes to put my yo-yo maker together and to stitch around. Folding that fabric in. Can you see that? And when you not line up those notches, your holes line up. And just make sure the side you come out is the side you go in. So we come out this side and then we go back in that side. Gives you a perfect yo-yo every time. Oops, I didn't hold the fabric down enough. And it's always better to have too much thread than not enough, because it needs to go stitch all the way around. And as you can see, I came up a little bit short. So because I've been making these so long, I know I can pop these out. And start to form my yo-yo. And as it gathers, you make sure you turn those raw edges in. And me, I'll just keep stitching. So no need to start over, just adapt. Folding over the edge and stitching. And when you get to that original knot, that's where you want to stop, because you're going to pull the knot and the needle to start forming your yo-yo. Gently pushing in the corners and the raw edges. And you may have to play with it to get all your pleats the same size for just a minute, but that's part of the fun part. So you got your yo-yo. Now you can tie this off. And tie it off in any way that it's convenient for you. I like the triple half knots. And here we have our first yo-yo. All right, we're ready to make our yo-yos. We're going to take our fabric and lay it down face down. Take the smaller ring and place it in the center. Make sure you have fabric all the way around. Take a straight pin, it's a little trick I learned, and stick it through the center of that small ring and carefully pull up the fabric so that the needle goes through the center ring and the fabric, and your fabric is stationary now. So when you put it in the big ring, oops, you can line up your mark with the notch on the big ring, and once you do that, your holes will line up and you can snap it in place. I hear 1, 2, 3. We're in, and just want to pull up these edges so they'll fold over when I start stitching. And once I had to hear that last click. Once I have that in place, I can take my needle out. And depending on how much thread you like to work with, I like to make it arm length. And since we're making a pillow that's going to be used either on the bed or on a couch, I like to use a double thread in my needle. Now that we've got our yo-yo set up in our frame, make sure your mark is lined up with the notch on the big frame, on the outside frame, so your holes will line up. And we're going to make one more yo-yo. So you make sure where you start, leave the tail on your thread so you can pull it out when we get ready to pull our yo-yo together. And we're just going in and out. Be careful that when you're going through the holes, you make sure you get both threads, both fabrics folded over. So as you can see, this goes very quickly. And just make sure when you're pulling through, you pull through both threads. And for me, I like to go ahead and do 2 holes at a time so I can make sure I go in and out on the same side. So thumb is holding down the fabric. And in and out the same side, so when I pull, it's in place. And we're almost to our mark. So we're back where we started. So now we can pop it out, take the smaller ring out, and as we pull that tail and the needle, be careful to turn your raw edges in. And just smooth it out. And once you get your yo-yo like you want, as tight as you want, just tie off the ends. I think I left my thread a little bit too long. It wants to get tangled. And I prefer the 3 half knots. And voila, we have another yo-yo made. Now that we have our yo-yos made, now we're ready to put them on our tree. So you want to take your yo-yos and decide how you want to arrange them. And what I did was take some of that basting tape and placed it on the back. We want to place it on the back so we can place them where we want them, and that basting tape will hold them temporarily in place. Decide what arrangement you want. So you put your first row. Let's see here. And then you want to put your second row. And of course we will be basting these down with the tape. Oops, let's switch up some colors here. Okay, and we have basically 20 yo-yos, so you can decide how many yo-yos you want to put on your tree. Once you get them placed, then you want to take a picture with your cell phone so you know what arrangement you have, and it'll be easier to go back to it. Because once you start sewing, you want to move the ones that you're not working on out of the way for the time being.